What if Obi-Wan Kenobi trained Luke Skywalker?
You fought in the Clone Wars?
Kill the Jedi!
You underestimate my power! My brother, Anakin! I loved you!
Yes, the same as your father.
What would happen if Owen and Breu weren't alive to raise Luke? What if he grew up as a Jedi youngling? And what now? Having first met Luke Skywalker upon the very moment of his birth, and so too being the closest father figure there to cradle him, he went further to deliver Luke personally to the Lars homestead before continuing to visit every single day. With Luke committing his first act with the Force by roughly 6 years old, as explained in the Children of the Jedi novel, Obi-Wan had already been chased off by Owen at this point, afraid that he too would train the boy, much like how he trained and killed his father. At least, that's what the Jedi Master thought nearly several days ago when he first left Mustafar and his fallen apprentice upon its lava-baked shores, having found out about Anakin's survival after the Battle of Kashyyyk, as explained in the Dark Lord: The Rise of the Darth Vader novel. While the exact date of the Legacy 16 comic is never given, much like Kenobi's actual promotion to Master, the implication is it takes place before Luke is 6, since Obi-Wan is still presently watching the homestead when Master Het arrives. Having all of this occur the exact same as in George's timeline, our change will start here, with the meetings of Master Kenobi and Master Het. While they would still greet one another with the Force and cautionary respect, here, in our timeline, when the battle erupts, the surrounding Sand People would honor their duel, but they wouldn't stand still and wait. Instead, they themselves would charge past, banthas in herd and blasters in hand. Wary of this danger, descending towards the defenseless family behind him, the Master of Sarisu did well to backpedal, striking and severing what stray Sand People he could amidst the assault from his former Jedi foe. Further down into the center of the homestead did these dueling Force wielders then roam, each protecting that which they held close. One, the brutalized, robbed, and often mistreated natives; the other, a boy and his family. Soon coupled with aid from Owen himself, as his own blaster rifle was pulled from his chest. Only so many shots could be made. So too was there a limit even for Obi-Wan himself, though he hadn't yet found it yet. Decapitating 3 Tuskens in a single slash as they each sought Breu, their deaths did little but add fuel onto Het's persecution, achieving the swiftest of strikes as he punched with the hilt of his lightsaber. Just then, a chorus of war cries rang aloud as what little barricades barred them finally gave way and the homestead was breached, drenching its Jedi protector with dread as Breu and Owen each called from afar. Luke then too added his own tears to this chorus of fear, stuck in his crib and too young to see, but old enough to feel, especially with the Force, feeling the life leave his would-be haunt as gaffy sticks struck and battered her. Blasting his foe with the Force, Obi-Wan soon disarmed, demasked, and sundered him, yet the action before had already been done, accompanied by the pained gasps of the very husband that witnessed it, swiftly crowded himself, while the doorway he blocked was his last line. The Jedi Owen pled for was still too far away. Only then was his final shot fired and blanked, fixed and accurate at his nearest moisture evaporator, serving its purpose without pause as a fiery force blasted back not just him, but each of the would-be attackers for his adopted son. So too was the same boy kept safe by the stone walls that shielded him. And while Obi-Wan Kenobi would personally blame himself for these losses, much like the loss of his own former Padawan, the safety of Luke came with a solemn peace as, like in George's timeline, he would refuse to kill Master Het. From here, a combination of the Adventure in Beggar's Canyon novel and the Sandstorm comic would take place. But instead of running away like in the comic, or going off to shoot womp rats like in the novel, Luke would have a vision. 13 years old at this point in our story, the year would be 6 BBY, and most of Luke's entire life has been spent isolated at Obiwan's hut, worried and concerned that even the slightest outing to a cantina or gathering would reveal his lineage. And that's because here, in our timeline, after speaking with the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan's urge to train the boy was reinforced, labeled as the will of the Force itself, a second chance to save that which Anakin had shattered. Even more than that, he refused to wait or delay in revealing that who his true father was. Already knowing well that Anakin was alive, so too was the caution he urged and laced with every word while detailing his fall to the dark side. Your father was seduced, tricked, and manipulated, labeling blame on everyone except the fallen Jedi who deserved it most. This was because Obi-Wan Kenobi kept blame for himself, always second-guessing things that had long since gone and passed. This speech would be the prelude to Luke's vision, where, after listening to his master and walking outside, he sat, legs crossed and hands curled around his father's lightsaber. There and then, beneath the twin suns that basked and baked his silhouette, upon the caked cliffside, with eyes closed and the Force being called, he drifted, losing not just himself, but also his bearings, as time, wind, temperature, and even the sand beneath him suddenly shifted and gave way, giving himself solely to the Force, just as his master had taught him, and his master before him. Grange, which once existed below, then morphed black as an endless sea of dunes were replaced by rivers of molten sludge and magma. Also, too, were the ever-bearing suns, now smothered by smog too thick and dense to clean. He could see it all as if he was actually there. The waterfalls of red, the shouted screams of animosity and anger, then finally the ignition of sabers, nothing akin to the playful sparring sessions he'd spent with his master, but a duel of the fates itself. Yet, just as quickly as this visage manifested, it too managed to fade, soon replaced by an actual oasis, limbed from blue and encircled by sandstone. Immediately placing himself back on Tatooine, but noticing quick that the sun had long since set, he first thought this to be nothing but a mirage, or another vision from the Force itself, knowing best how rare water actually was on his home planet, which is why curiosity turned to shock as the surface in front soon quaked and trembled, parting and splitting. A boy, nearly younger than himself, then stood in the center of such a plain, now enveloped by what appeared as vast as an ocean, yet still no more deeper than an ankle as it stretched without sight or region. Annie was his name, and fear was the emotion that leaked from him, fear that nearly infected the visiting student beside him, warning the same tales that his own master had given him, that fear was the first path to the dark side. Anger then came, and so too was it swiftly trailed by hatred, both becoming swallowed by suffering too much to obscure, emotions and passion, sensations and feelings, the Force itself, odd and horroring, love without attachment. Luke spoke aloud the first lesson ever given to him, to act on being able to love while accepting loss, like the loss his master felt for Siritachi, for Qui-Gon Jinn, and indeed, too, for his now fallen father. Hugging Annie while he shot to give comfort, so too did the water itself fully give way to the moisture-soaked grains beneath them, lit and illuminated only by the now trio of moons overhead and haunted by howls. Crate dragons. The boy could notice their distinctive cries anywhere, only now they were all around him, having journeyed deep into the canyons of Tatooine, too lost in meditation to sense or foresee the danger around him until the Force itself jolted him awake. First one crawled free from a barren cave to arch itself up and roar, then another descended from an adjacent cave, with two more following seconds later, before three came from an opposing angle to that, and four more after those. Giving up any attempt to count, and having already dismissed the prospect of fighting, legs spun fast to sprint as specked sand was flung in debris, too worried to notice how tight his grip still was upon his father's lightsaber, knuckles white and fingers red. Dashing and running, leaping and rolling, ducking and twirling, further and farther he sought to place himself from the beasts behind. Yet far too many of them there were, far too large and far too hungry, always grouping together during the summer mating season, desperately using what force powers he did have. Boulders were yanked loose before turning his lightsaber on to slash rocks, hoping anything would give him just the tiniest of delays, knowing well that he was considered prey. Spotting soon a cracked surface to a cave before leaping inside, its entryway was promptly rammed and battered, clawed and gnawed, inspiring its occupant to continue his flight as an ever-bearing aura of blue lit his path. Only still, so much could be done in the face of such numbered predators, eventually trapped as three beasts cornered him again, promptly two, before becoming one, as Obiwan Kenobi finally arrived, rushing his Padawan towards the very direction he came from. Soothing what dragons he could with the Force, others continued to claw and charge, to howl with their pitched mating cry, soon developing into a crash of three as each sought to eat their prey, but only managing to chew stray pebbles instead. Rocks from above then gave way as pressure forced them to sunder and quake, to break and sedate as Obi-Wan's lightsaber itself was knocked loose and crushed, still caring about nothing except the boy he charged himself to protect.
Run, Luke, run!
Faster they went now, with the boy in front hurriedly slicing and knocking over what he could, none of which managing to stop the stampede behind, cobbled and crushed, as even one crate dragon by itself was nearly too large to hold. Further still was the speed of such a creature, kept at bay only due to the gifted boon of force speed, keeping both master and Padawan aflight. But so too did it make turning hard, twisting impossible, and pivoting untenable. Even more difficult was the power and focus needed to maintain such a feat, failing fast as Luke finally reached his limit with the cave's door narrowly before him, shoved within seconds as Master Obi-Wan took his place to shift and stand, losing fast his wrist and hand. So too would even more rocks begin to plummet, striking their would-be attackers, while also burying those that sought safety, encouraging Luke to shout and scream, to raise arms high and channel the Force. This was all his fault. Anakin's son labeled blame on himself for everything, shuffling every act and loss upon his shoulders. But he was powerful. He could fix this, and he would fix this, begging for his master to come, to reach out and retreat. So concerned about the hobbled figure before him was he now, that the sensation of fear budding within took too long to notice, afraid to lose his master, angry at himself for letting it get this far, and hatred at the beast responsible.
This is a dangerous time for you.
Was the only response Obi-Wan managed to muster, sitting up straight while his sole remaining arm was crossed over his lap, sinking deep into meditation even here and now, when and where everything was falling around him. Because this wasn't just some random accident or a freak mistake. In the words of Master Obiwan Kenobi, this moment was destined, foretold by the Force itself as one of the grandest of tests, not just for his student, but also himself. For 13 years had the boy in front of him been trained. For over a decade had he been prepared, and like his father, he was powerful. So powerful, in fact, that Obi-Wan too felt the same level of concern about his fall. Love without attachment. Obi-Wan spoke softly and sincerely, serene and straight to the point, ignoring the hissing cries behind him, ever funneled and gazing towards the boy beyond, the Padawan he'd given and trained everything to.
I cannot interfere.
First came as a soft request, as Luke struggled not just against the collapsing cave overhead, but the instructions given to him, ordered to turn and leave, to return home as if nothing was going on, and as if no one was about to be lost. And this boy could not do it. He refused to do it. To speak about detachment was one thing, but to fully accept it was nearly too much to bear. Still pressing shoulders upward, while entrapped boots now began to sink, both flowing with the Force. Luke was strong enough to save him. He knew he could, going further and farther, grinding teeth and squinting eyes, and that's why the next words from his master hit so hard, warning him that power wasn't everything. Indeed, the test laid before his student was nothing about power. It was about acceptance, to realize that some things are meant to be, the very concept that caused his father to fall in the first place, the inability to let go of someone that he loved. Still, too, his first lesson, but never fully learned. I won't let go. I can't. Anyone else but you. If Luke failed here, he would be alone not just now, but forever. A feared premonition that turned to reality as suddenly his still-seated master faded from the very clothes he wore. Gone was Master Kenobi now, and in his place, nothing except emptied fabric, and save too his ruined lightsaber already broken. Sights too sore for the eyes that bore them, as each swelled with tears, while his heart was filled with fear. Fear that promptly turned into anger before morphing into hate and finally manifesting itself as suffering. Too lost to notice the now rising sun. All until the voice he thought lost spoke once again, this time echoing through his mind.
Run, Luke, run!
Obi-Wan wasn't there physically, but spiritually his presence was felt, giving his Padawan the boost he needed. Because fear then left him. Anger had faded, hatred was consumed, and suffering was ended. And that's why Luke didn't wait, not to turn around and run, not for the collapsing cave behind him, and nor the Tuskens that soon bore to follow him. All the way home he went, over the entire Dune Sea itself, not even noticing the twin suns as they fully rose to welcome in a new day. Such would be his place, for many moons, and even more days, as this regretful Padawan expected an empty home, but was greeted by the ethereal and blue silhouette of his now fallen master, still here, whenever and wherever his student would need. From here, everything would unfold exactly as in George's timeline, with the obvious exception of Luke still remaining a Padawan, while the loss of his master would constitute his trial of flesh, and his confrontation of Annie's ghost would be his trial by spirit. So too would his act to stand up against the Krayt Dragons be founded as his trial of courage, doing that which no boy before him could do, yet remaining bound by the last two trials, both of which kept him from becoming a Jedi Knight. The trial of insight and the trial of skill, concepts kept close in mind each morning as he woke up first to stretch, before meditating and training, no longer just with Obi-Wan alone, but so too with his own Elder Master, Qui-Gon Jinn himself. And for 6 years this would continue, all until the boarding of Organa's ship, the arrest of Leia, and the resulting fallout from orbit over Tatooine, where, in George's timeline, Leia and her soldiers surrender after sneaking the plans aboard the escape pod. Here, however, in our timeline, only Leia would stay behind, seeking to negotiate better terms, while all escape pods were fielded and launched. Of course, several of these would be shot down, yet their purpose would be achieved: to deny hostages for the Empire while providing cover for C-3PO and R2-D2. Because of this, our next change will start here, where each of these droids were originally captured by Jawas before being sold. Now, however, they're discovered by a 19-year-old Jedi Padawan, Luke Skywalker, during his daily patrol of the desert. Thinking little of them at first, and already preoccupied with a lingering disturbance in the Force, he took them home only because his gut told them to, offering one an oil bath, while the other he spent time to clean and pick grains of sand from. As C-3PO would love such luxury, R2-D2 alone was the sole source of concern, beating and bopping, twisting and twirling, detailing the archive of a message meant to be given and its intended host, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sensing the shift that such an utterance made, Luke knew well when his master now sought to commune with him through the Force, proclaiming aloud to both present that he indeed was the student to Obi-Wan, but his master had long since become one with the Force. "Oh dear," was all the nearest protocol droid could muster, labeling well that all hope and salvation had been placed upon him, detailing that many and most were doomed to dismay and turmoil, especially now the rebellion against the Empire. Then and there, though, R2-D2 made his message known and apparent, airing its hollow broadcast as Princess Leia, delegate from Alderaan, pled for Obi-Wan Kenobi personally. Having never met each other, but knowing well the honor that such a man had through stories from her adopted father. "You're my only hope." Words meant for his master rebounded aloud in his own head, usually aloft and far gone. To stay on Tatooine and wait, to train and become a Jedi Knight. Only then would he be ready to confront his father. At least, that's what he used to think, as more and more stories from the galaxy around would creep across his home planet, telling tales of murder, of Wookiee genocide, of the execution for all Jedi, and the dissolvement of the old Republic Senate.
Luke!
Reaching to grip his own Padawan braid, Qui-Gon and Kenobi each spoke simultaneously, telling him to leave, to pack his bags and flee, to ready himself for his next test, and one long overdue. The trial of skill. Skill that would come to desperate need after leaving his hut with the droids he rescued before journeying to Mos Eisley. There and then, in the very place his master labeled as a cesspit of scum and villainy, stormtroopers roamed. Normally kept free and far from hut space, crime lords only had so much say and power when dealing with the Galactic Empire itself, save the tiniest of repercussions, especially when spice dealers were already left to roam. Shutt's line of thought left Luke nearly speechless when he saw what at first he couldn't believe: number upon number of captured rebel soldiers, all disarmed and restrained, detained, and pressed with wrists cuffed and their backs to a wall of sandstone, guilty of crimes against the Empire, aiding those against the Empire, conspiring against the Empire, and waging warfare against the Empire. Each of these carried by itself the penalty of death by execution. All four combined left no reason or rhyme to go free. Blaster rifles were then raised and positions taken as an example was meant to be made to show all what happens when you defy the Empire. All until a lightsaber was ignited, the Force was flung, and a war cry made aloud.
For the Republic!
Luke's heart thought of his master while fighting like his father, deflecting 12 shots at once and disarming each of their hosts. Trained for nearly 2 decades, any attempt to break or breach his usage of Shurisu was battered back by the sight of his blade. His left hand was then raised high and fingers curled into a tightening fist, cracking and sundering the cuffs that restrained those around him, while so too were the minds of his enemies, left shattered and dazed, dropping and falling. Giving his name as Jedi Padawan Skywalker and his master's name as Obiwan Kenobi, he told them their message had been received. But even his adept perception failed to notice the myriad of sideways glances that such an uttered name quickly garnished. Only the Rebellion commanding officer, Able 1707, greeted him warmly and welcomingly, having himself heard each of the Jedi names 100 times before, but still wasting little seconds to delay as blasters were scavenged and a path was made clear. Storming the spaceport with what little numbers they had, a ship was captured and its unwilling host, Han Solo, was forced to take off, hostile at first, until thousands of credits were named as compensation once arrival to Alderaan was achieved. And so, from here, a journey was made, hyperspace was traveled, and battle was prepared for. All except the Jedi Padawan there to witness them. Physically present, of course, but mentally 1,000 parsecs away, unable to shake the disturbance in the Force.